Hi, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are hosting our sample class on examining the Middle East and North Africa, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This sample class is going to examine the issues relating to the geography, history, economics, culture, and political behavior of this region. Tonight, you'll have the opportunity to hear from our expert on these issues in this region, Professor Heba El-Shalazi. She has 28 years of experience in civic and union organizing, institution building, leadership skills training, labor education and training methodologies, political advocacy and development, implementation, and management of international programs in the Middle East and North African regions. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Heba Eschalazi. If you do have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom. Please feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you, Paul. Really love being here with you. Sorry I can't see you guys, but you can see me. So I'm going to do a quick shout out here to May and to Yamilet. Hello. And let's see if I see any other um, former students, and I call them now repeat offenders when they decide to take another class with me. So it's our inside joke. So anyway, welcome this evening. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend it with me and with others. So let's see. I do want to talk about a few things, so let's begin. But first, I have been told that if you want to ask a question or respond to anything that I ask, all you need to do is raise your hand, and Paul will let you in. Okay, it will work some magic there. So anyway, so that's all you need to do is raise your hand. Okay. All right. So I want to talk about the region, the Middle East and North Africa. I do truly want to spend time talking about the good and the bad and then the ugly, okay, unfortunately. And actually, I want you to, to be able to help me with kind of completing these sort of three columns, if you will. Um, but I'll give a little overview first, and then I want to tell you a story of I'm debating between two sort of really big issues that relate to the region, and that is Israel and Palestine. The Arab uprisings of 2010, 2011. We're going into 10 years now. And actually, I'll add a third one, the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and what that means for the region. So these are three stories, if you will, that I wanted to share with you. So I think I'll pick one of them. If you have any requests, let me know. Through the chat or raise your hand. Then I did want to also spend a few minutes talking about the methodology of teaching in terms of if I was teaching a graduate level class, this is how I would do it. And so I want to share that with you. There are about 5 points that I'd like to go through. So actually, let me start with that. So, if you're taking or when you take a graduate level class, probably one of the first things that you'll be sort of taken aback with is the amount of reading. We expect a lot more reading on the graduate level, reading of journal articles, of books, and so forth. So I like to say that you're going to develop your reading with meaning skills. So the idea that you're going to read with meaning and you're going to do it quickly. So otherwise, between us, and you never, and I will deny this in a court of law, how do you do very intelligent and very good skimming? I remember my days as a graduate student, and I had a book a week. A book, we're talking 300 pages, and that was just for one class. So imagine, three classes, four classes, and if they each, so that meant, 3 or 4 books a week. So the idea is you learn the geography of a book. And when it's well written, you can very much, read the introduction, read the conclusion, go through each chapter in terms of the subheadings. Again, there's a lot of techniques and strategy, if you will, on this sort of reading with meaning type of skills. And you will definitely develop that in graduate school because there's a lot of reading and time is an issue. So what we like also to do with graduate level classes is to develop your research skills. So you're definitely, if you've been doing research already and you've been writing papers, well, guess what? You're going to do that even more. And we're going to also show you more in terms of the types of research that exist. And you actually, I think many of graduate programs, you have to take a research methodology class. So that's another thing that you'll see in a graduate level class. Also, the ability to ask questions, but ask questions that probe deeper, and also to develop your analysis in terms of actually being a little bit more skeptical, asking sort of questions that will then bring out more details, things like that. So you'll find that we do rely on you working and improving those abilities. And that leads me to sort of the next big item that in terms of how I teach classes is in terms of discussions based on the readings, in the sense that everything that you get assigned, we will have to read and discuss. So that you'll be assured of. And then also developing your presentation skills. So getting up in front of an audience and being able to, give a concise, interesting presentation, ask questions, and then have questions be asked of you. So these are all, again, I find that these are skills that can help in the days after Mason. I always like to talk about life after Mason, when your official studies end. So the discussions based on the readings as well as student presentations are very, very important part, I think, of our graduate level classes, or at least the class I would be teaching. Another one is also using a variety of different tools. Every time you come to class and you listen to me lecture, and then ask a few questions, that gets dull after a while. So I find that using different tools, different ways of delivering the information to you, or of analyzing a certain situation and so forth, is incredibly helpful. So use of films, use of artistic, whether it's designs or graphic. I've even used graphic novels, which might be a little shocking, but they're absolutely wonderful. Some of them are excellent. For those of you who've, maybe you might be familiar, there's one called Persepolis, written about a young girl's childhood and growing up in Iran before and after the 1979 revolution. It's an excellent book. So anyway, so I use sometimes, I will be, the next semester I'm teaching a class on Israel and Palestine, and I'll be using a few graphic novels actually, which are really interesting. So using films, documentaries, short videos can communicate knowledge and communicate information very well. Also having guest speakers. Guest speakers can then lend a different point of view and also, share knowledge. For example, a good friend of mine who, worked at the World Bank for 25 odd years, and he came and spoke to one of my classes and had a lot of really great firsthand experience. So those, I would think, in terms of methods, in terms of graduate level, that I hope that you that's what you will see in any of my classes on a graduate level. Okay, yes, there will be an increase in reading and an increase in writing as well, because we do emphasize the reading, analysis, and then putting it down on paper. And sometimes they're short 2 to 3 page papers, and possibly also a research paper that would be much longer for sort of towards the end as a sort of a final, instead of a final exam, for example. So we put a lot of emphasis on that. So anyway, I hope that helps in terms of your considerations and looking at a graduate level. And actually that brings me to kind of say just a few words about me. As many of you maybe you might have looked up my bio, and actually I'm very proud to say that our Schar School magazine, The Pulse, had actually, there was an article in there where the journalist wrote something about me and this teaching is my second career. And it is a second career. So I bring to the classroom a lot of firsthand experience living, working, and being from the Middle East and North Africa. And boy, do I have a lot of stories. And some of you might have heard my stories already. So yes, because I like to say that it's much easier for me to say which countries I have not been to. Out of the, let's see, there are 25 countries within the Middle East and North Africa. We have, Turkey, Iran, and Israel, which are not considered Arab countries, okay, but they're included in the Middle East. And then we have 22 Arab countries, that are members of the Arab League, if you will. So that's kind of how we make but all of that together is the Middle East and North Africa. And so out of all those countries, I have not been to Mauritania, Sudan, South Sudan, and Saudi Arabia. Yep, that's it. Okay, so all the others I've been to and spent time and lived, even in some cases, lived several years. So, and worked there. I worked in the democracy, promotion, civil society, empowerment, empowering and building institutions, independent institutions that can be monitoring monitoring government, and sort of civil society. I worked in the realm of civil society as well as which would be NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in a variety of different spheres, but also in terms of I also worked in the political realm in the sense of elections, election monitoring, and also working with political parties, helping in terms of developing, building their platforms, what is their campaign going to look like, but also in terms of particularly women running for public office, particularly for the first time. We did a lot of training and a lot of work with them. So anyway, so that's a quick summary of 28 years of work. But I have to say that before I spent time in the Middle East and North Africa, though, I did spend 7 years working in Central and Eastern Europe. And that was a fascinating experience. Particularly, I did witness the fall of the Berlin Wall, which many of you have read about. I actually saw it in 1989. And then the changes that happened starting in 1990 and thereafter in Central and Eastern Europe, where they were now free, open in terms of travel, but also in terms of developing their institutions and developing democratic practices. So it was a really, really interesting and fascinating time. So I spent probably the bulk of my time in Romania and a bit in Poland and Bulgaria. And also at the time it was Czechoslovakia, but then it's become the Czech Republic and then the Slovak Republic. So anyway, okay, so that's, I weaved in that information with talking about methodology of teaching. Now I think it's time to talk about the Middle East and North Africa, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And actually, some of you might remember that this is actually, I'm borrowing this from, I think, a Clint Eastwood movie. But don't quote me on that. Let's see. Let me stop for a second. Any questions? Raise hands. I'm looking at the chat here. Hello, everyone. Okay. No, I don't see any questions there. Let's see. Hello, May. Hello, Yamilet. Looking at Barbara Montgomery. Hello. And okay, and hello to everybody else. So, any questions or no questions? Okay. All you have to do is raise your hand. All right. From Maya to all the panel. Oh, hello, Maya. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So let's talk about the Middle East and North Africa. This is where I need to engage you a little bit. Okay. Can you think of a leader in the Middle East and North Africa? And I'm saying starting from 1900, so the 20th century, okay, until the present, who has left an indelible, meaning incredible, influence on the region, and that influence can be good, and it could also be bad, okay, because there's no perfection here. So can you think of a leader? And for some of you who've, read a little bit about the region, or maybe have taken my Government 332, hint, hint, which is the undergraduate. Mariam Abdul Latif, hello. Of course. She says, Kamal Abdel Nasser.
We've got a hand raised here, so this is coming from May. I'm going to allow you to talk.
Oh, May. Yes, hello, May.
Unmute yourself and talk.
Hi, Professor.
Ahlan, hello.
I'd say King Hussein of Jordan.
King Hussein of Jordan?
Yes.
Okay, and why?
Yep. His impact on not only Jordan, but in the region, especially with Palestine and all the peace talks. I mean, his reign went on for 40 years.
Yeah,
so,
yes, he was around for a while.
he's considered to be the peacemaking in all the process.
Okay, all right, very good. So we've got two so far. Thank you, May. Shukran. And by the way, I also have a hidden agenda when I teach classes about the Middle East, whether they're undergraduate or graduate. Yes, I do share good, nice words in Arabic. Okay. So hello, how are you? Thank you, all those types of things. So I have a little bit of a hidden agenda there where I can teach you a few words. So I have May who made a good argument for King Hussein. King Hussein was, he has since passed away. Now his son is the king of Jordan. That's King Abdullah II. King Hussein ruled for 40 years. So that's one thing about the Middle East, I must say, is longevity. When anyone tries to tell you that the Middle East is unstable, you say, excuse me? What do you mean by unstable? Because when it comes to government and it comes to rulers, particularly kings, which we still have in the region, and sultans too. I know Sultan kind of evokes the image of sort of 1001 Nights or Aladdin, but we still have one, just one though, in Oman. And so they're around for a long time. So we're talking, and we also have presidents, excuse me. We have presidents who also, served for 30 plus years. So that's one thing about stability, if you will, in the region, that we have the rulers of governments who stay there for quite a while. So thank you, May, for that, for King Hussein. And King Hussein, yes, he did leave a big mark in terms of his own country, but also in the region. Because if you look at Jordan, Jordan lives and hangs out, I call it, in a really difficult neighborhood, in the sense that look at the neighbors. And Jordan has had to, without any oil resources, without any, I mean, really, this is a country that the resource are its people. Its people. And they have been a place where refugees and migrants have come for safety and for a safe haven. So whether it was the Palestinians from 1948 and then 67, of course, and then thereafter, to the Syrians coming with their civil war now, to the Iraqis coming after the invasion in 2003. So we have, so Jordan is a small country with very limited resources. And King Hussein has managed through some very troubled and difficult waters, for sure. I'm going to write down here because I want to talk about water, actually, in the Middle East. All right. Now, Maryam, hello, Maryam. It's great to have you back. Gamal Abdel Nasser, and I know there's I call it part of the Egyptian mafia that we have at George Mason, but in a very good way. All right, we only do good things. But Egypt used to be. We call it in Arabic Dunya, meaning the mother of the world, and I say used to be, in the sense that in the 50s and 60s and 70s, Egypt had this very marked position within the Middle East that was very important politically, geographically, but also culturally and arts wise and literature wise. I mean, Egypt truly was this, heavyweight, if you will. And the reason I put it in the past tense is that unfortunately, politically, I think Egypt has taken second place. It's stepped down, and actually the political, if you will, political power in the region has shifted. And I would like to ask a question. Where do you think it has shifted? Who or which countries do you think now are sort of the leaders, or when they speak, everyone else listens? Where are the politics taking place today? Any hands?
Yes, Ariel, I'm going to allow you to talk in just a second here.
All right.
All right, go ahead, Ariel. You can unmute.
Please.
Hello, Professor. Oh, sorry. I was going to answer, I guess, one of your questions about leaders in the Middle Eastern world.
Okay.
I was actually going to say Abdulaziz Bouteflika, since he was just recently, I guess, in the last year, ousted. But I'm sorry. I know that probably relevant to your question. I'm just.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Actually gives me an opportunity to talk about Algeria. But you felt, now why did you choose him, Ariel?
I was just thinking in terms of him recently being ousted, and in 2016 in the Smile Revolution. And also, I'm a governance nerd. I love learning about it, and I would love to hear what actually, I know this is actually going to be in my later part. I was going to ask you about in a hopefully soon, a post-COVID world, what governance will look like in the Middle East.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate both.
And
Thank you.
We have one more from your original question too, from Brittany. Let me give her the ability.
All right. Hello. Hi, Brittany.
All right, Brittany, go ahead and you can talk. Are you there, Brittany?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
No
So to answer your previous question, the first leader that came to my mind is the Ayatollah Khomeini.
Yeah.
I think that is, like, to me, one of the most obvious answers, simply from the way that he shifted Iranian society and government from a secular place to a more religious place. So I think he's definitely a big player in answering your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Boy, we're still talking about him today.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He is still, and actually, I'll tell you guys also a little story. I was in Iran in 2004, and it was very interesting because Khomeini had passed away. Okay. Because he passed away only, 10 years after the revolution, from 70, he passed away in 1989. But I was teaching workshops there to different civil society organizations, NGOs, and every government building or every basically organization, you walk into the conference room, whatever, you'll always see a picture of
Mm-hmm.
Ayatollah Khomeini up on the wall. I mean, I know as Americans, we don't, we don't have that. I mean, the only time is when you go to a US embassy overseas, and then you're suddenly you see the president and the vice president, and you're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. But anyway, so I was in the middle of talking about strategic planning and talking about vision and what it means, and talking about mission and what is the mission, of an organization and so forth. And then my eye kind of shifts because I was doing this in English because my Farsi is like this
Mm-hmm.
little, and so someone was translating for me. So anyway, and then my vision kind of my eyes raised up, and I was looking at the photo of Khomeini up on the
Mm-hmm.
wall, and in my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe I should just mention that Khomeini had a vision for Iran, and then something whispered in my head saying, no, 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 Heba, stay away from that. This is all going on inside, right? And it's
Yeah.
lovely because I'm being translated, so there's always a
Mm-hmm.
moment where I'm not talking, so I have to wait, until so I can gather my thoughts. So anyway, so this passes, we have then our tea break, and a young woman comes up to me from the students, lovely, lovely young woman, and she speaks English. So, and she goes, she called me professor, I guess. She says, I noticed that you were looking at, the photo of Khomeini, and we were talking about mission and vision and all that. I just want you to know, he definitely did not have a mission or a vision for me. And I was like, okay, thank you. And I was like, oh, thank you very much for letting me know. I mean, she was very adamant in the sense that his whatever vision he had, it was not applicable to her and, sort of her generation is what, because we ended up talking more afterward.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you that I did not use him as an example. So anyway, because she was like, nope, she didn't want to hear about it, in the sense that they've moved on, and his
Mm-hmm.
vision and mission is, in the past. But thank you very much, Brittany. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Any others? Yeah. Okay. All right.
That's it, yeah.
So okay, and then I asked the second question about the shifting of the politics, okay, from Egypt, which is the center of the universe. Sorry, it's still in the heart, it's still Dunya, but has shifted where? And Maya responded very, very correctly. Yes, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, and I'd add the United Arab Emirates, maybe Kuwait, Qatar when they were not angry with Qatar, because right now Qatar is a bit on the outs. But the Gulf countries, they are now becoming very much the wheeler and dealers, and sort of that center of the politics of the region. And it's something I must say that sort of us old hands that been around for a while, we can see it would make sense, yes, but it's sort of still that gravitas, that sense of presence that Egypt had, under Nasser. It's hard. It's hard because you look at these Gulf countries and you say, before 1970, they didn't even have paved roads. Yes, they look amazing today, and they have incredible investments, and they've done so much in a very short period of time. It's absolutely fascinating, actually, when you look at a period of 40 years, what they've been able to do and how much they've been able to progress, and how much of the infrastructure that they've been able to build, education, healthcare. I mean, truly bringing their people, forward and helping very much so. So it's really very interesting to see that, and they are investing money in the arts and in culture and in literature. I think one of the biggest awards for the best Arabic novel comes out of the United Arab Emirates. So things like that. So I must say they are using their income from the sale of oil and natural gas and so forth. We call that rents, because we consider them rentier states because they rely on one sector of an economy. They're not diversified, even though the United Arab Emirates is beginning to diversify even more than Saudi. But it's fascinating to watch, okay? And then I'm going to plug in here this rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which is a huge rivalry. And that's where, thank you, I believe it was Brittany who said, hey, the Ayatollah Khomeini, he is definitely a leader who is left an indelible mark on the Middle East and North Africa. And we're still discussing it today, because 1979 was this year that just, I don't know what was going on. Must have been something in the water or something in the air that made 1979 be this, incredible, changing, challenging type of year. We had the Islamic Revolution in Iran. The same time, we had the takeover of the Grand Mosque in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, which was a very big deal. And it was taken over by a group of Sunni Muslims, not Shia, Sunni. And I think everyone is familiar with the two main sects in Islam, Sunni and Shia. So anyway, so this was a big affront to the ruling family and to the establishment, the religious establishment of the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. So it was a big, slap in the face to them. And it caused a major shift after 1979 in Saudi Arabia, in terms of becoming much more conservative, because the reason that those Sunni separatists or a group was they were protesting that the royal family, the government, had forgotten what their roots and what their basis was, and the country was going, to that, place where stop, drop, and roll doesn't work. That's my polite way of saying. And for those of you who went to American elementary schools, you know about stop, drop, and roll. Okay, so normally in a classroom I get a few laughs, but I know that that's hard. So here we have, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, which exactly took a secular government and it replaced it with an Islamic republic, and a very stringent, very tough. And you have a Saudi Arabia that went through this big shakeup and reverting to and becoming much, much more conservative. And that's what currently the Crown Prince is reopening. MBS, his Vision 2030, and what he's trying to do is kind of to, reopen and get back. He's actually said it, to return to the days of even before 1979 in terms of, I'm going to call them allowances or freedoms, if you will. So thank you for mentioning Khomeini, and in terms of Iran, and then also in terms of Iran's influence in the region. Talk about their influence in Yemen, their influence in Lebanon when it comes to Hezbollah, their influence with Hamas when it comes to the Palestinian question, and their influence with Syria today in terms of the government in Syria. So, they are definitely a power to be reckoned with. And it's so ironic, because before 1979, there was actually the twin pillar policy of the United States. And the twin pillars were Saudi Arabia and Iran, but of course, under different governments. And this was before 1979. So anyway, so that's thank you for getting us started on that. Bouteflika and Algeria. So let's leave the Gulf countries there for a moment, and that, sort of power center, if you will, and let's go all the way across to North Africa. Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya. Egypt is kind of a center on its own. It's not included in that kind of that North African grouping. We call it the Arab Maghreb grouping because it just doesn't fit, in the sense that Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia particularly have the French colonial experience under their belt. They, while Libya had Italian colonialism, but they're sort of cut out of the same piece of fabric. If you get my my drift, in the sense that we're talking about a whole bolt of fabric. Anybody sew? And sort of that whole bolt has little sections in it, and North Africa is one section or sub-region, and they've had the French influence, very much so. They've had one party rule. They have one kingdom, that being Morocco, and they have Tunisia, the one success story after the Arab Uprisings. So they're kind of an interesting grouping or sub-region. And Bouteflika, oh my, Bouteflika wanted to run for a 5th term. All right, a 5th term where he, each term I think is 5 years, 5 or 6 years. And before that election was held, a year or two, he's an elderly gentleman, and he had a stroke. Really terrible. And the stroke left him wheelchair bound, I believe could not speak, and had difficulty even in movement in terms of his arms and so forth. And with all of this, he and the people around him wanted him to run for a 5th term of, I think, 5 or 6 years, 6 years as president. It's beyond the pale. It's too much. And the Algerians went to the streets. They said, too much. It's enough. In French, they'd say, ça suffit. And they would say, dégagez, meaning, step down. French and Arabic are a nice little mix there. So if any of you know any French. So, they went to the streets and protested peacefully. And they were able to pressure him to step down. But it's really shocking. This is a man who could not get up and speak, let alone give a speech, let alone, give an interview. And it really just shows you, sadly, the amount of corruption, the people around him that were propping him, but also the military. Because when you talk about Algeria, you have to speak about the military and the military's role in politics. Okay. So in terms of the types of governments, as I mentioned, we have kingdoms where we have kings. We have emirates, which have emirs, which are princes. And we have one sultanate, and that's Oman, where you have a sultan. And you have presidents, but these presidents sometimes are for life. And that's where the fascinating and wonderful event of the Arab Uprisings, even though it didn't completely go the way we wanted it. I mean, we have to look at each country. But I wrote it down here in my notes, showing the world they can take a chance. They can take a chance, and that they can organize, and they can do it collectively. And they did it without using violence, which was incredibly important, because they had been told by the terrorist organizations, groups like Hezbollah, for example, their militia. Remember, Hezbollah is a complicated concept, all right? Because they're also their politicians who are in the Lebanese parliament. But they were told by, ISIS that the only way you can bring change is through violence. And the people said, no. We can bring change using that wonderful power of the people. Do not ever underestimate the slow encroachment of the power of the people. And if you have a moment and want to look up that concept, Professor Asif Bayat at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, wrote a lot about the power of the people. And so one still has hope. As long as there are, active citizens who are trying with each day to just live. They want to live with the universal principles that we all hold dear and near to our hearts. So thank you. Thank you for putting on the table Bouteflika, because the people spoke, the Algerians spoke, and said that's enough. So now, have they been able to tackle all the issues regarding the military? No, that's much more difficult, because the military, they have guns and the military is well organized. So where else do we find this phenomenon of the military playing a political role? Now, Mariam, you should know this.
Yep.
Anything you want to say something?
Yep.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Hang on 1 second.
I love this. I mean, I have to interact with you guys.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello, hi, Mariam.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I was gonna ask, because in Egypt it's the same. So I was gonna ask you, what is the pattern? Like, what is it about the Middle East where we see this happen in these countries where the military takes over, and then it's nearly impossible to get them off? Because after Mubarak was he was ex-military, and so he ruled like the military would. And then after the revolution, we had I forgot his name. Sorry, I forgot his name. Morsi. And that was the only non-military rule that we've ever had, because after that we have Sisi, which is a military rule again. So I believe, other than like the king, that was the last time we ever had any non-military rule in Egypt.
Thank you, Mariam. You ask a very, very good and important question. So when you're, analyzing a country and looking at who holds the keys to the power, and where the power lays, because it's not always obvious. The military is one where they're very well organized. They have equipment. They are supported financially. And they are from, and we say it in Arabic, Ammat al-Shab, meaning they are from the regular people of the regular citizens, because there's still, what do you call it, conscription? There's still the draft, basically, where after you finish high school, you have to go and serve for 2 years. Okay, but if you come from money and you're wealthy, you can buy your way out. Sorry. So anyway, so it's made of, so this is a military that is made of course, the population. So what makes the Middle East so unique? Well, I don't think it's completely unique, in the sense that we can go around the world and we could see places in Asia, countries in Asia, Thailand, for example, where the military is very important. Vietnam, the military is very important. Even China to a certain degree, North Korea. These are not great examples. I mean, who wants to be like those countries per se? So these are remnants basically from a time when you had a colonial power. They look around and they see what are the institutions, and one of them is the military. The military then is supported, trained. I mean, the British trained the military in Egypt as well as in Jordan. And they were left with sort of that legacy of that organized institution that was there to protect the land and also protect the people. See, it's very interesting, because early on in the uprisings in 2011, the military was out there among the people, and they were there like, hey guys, we're here to protect you, because we're never going to shoot you, or attack you. So but unfortunately that changed over a period of months, actually. And unfortunately, the military was misused to attack the people. So we do see this, and there are scholars who they study the military, their role, and their increase in role. Now, for example, Egypt, the military there is part of the economy. So literally, we have the military. First of all, they build roads. All right, they build structures, so they kind of behave like the Army Corps of Engineers plus plus. They've actually displaced local construction companies, but they also have factories where they make pasta. Yeah, we call it macarona. Uh, yeah, they make pasta and everyone knows the brand. They have their own brand name, and they make all kinds of things and they get a lot of benefits, so it's very difficult to compete with them. So if you're a private sector owner of a factory that makes pasta, you really can't compete, frankly, because the military gets free water, free electricity, probably doesn't pay any taxes. Yeah, definitely doesn't pay any taxes. And so how can you compete? And at this point, we can only guess as to how much the Egyptian military owns in terms of the percentage of the economy. There are those who say it's between 30 to 40%. That's a lot. They also make refrigerators, they make dishwashers, they make smaller electrical appliances. These are military factories. So anyway, it's thank you, Mariam. I mean, you really ask a very important question. And let's go across. I mean, we have Algeria, we have Egypt. Go across, you have Syria that still has a very strong military, and that's been fighting on behalf of that government. Then go to Iraq. Iraq used to have a strong military. And the military played an important role. And when you had Saddam Hussein, I mean, he's a military guy. And let's see, I'm going kind of across. Gulf countries, no, no, not at all. And Oman, the former Sultan, Allah yarhamu, he passed away last year. Sultan Qaboos, he came out of the military, but he was also a member of the royal family, so he played that role. And then coming to Yemen, yeah, Yemen, the president there had come out of the military. So it's really just very simply, it's the best organized institution that you find in a country. I hope I've answered your question. I mean, we could, I actually spend a whole class period just talking about, the military and role and all that. Thank you, Mariam.
We have a question from Ariel too.
Oh, please, Ariel.
Go ahead, Ariel.
Go ahead.
Sorry, hi, I just wanted to add something with the military. I was thinking also Israel, but since they have a mandatory conscription.
Of course.
And I think, sorry, my audio was going in and out. So I'm sorry if you already mentioned Saudi Arabia, because I was thinking about how they recently bought some Russian military aircraft as well.
Yeah, Ariel, thank you very much. Actually, it's interesting. I was just thinking sort of the Arab countries versus the Turkey, Iran and Israel, but absolutely we can. And I was thinking about them being in government. But we've had former military, like Ariel Sharon, actually, who became Prime Minister of Israel. So we have had former military, but yes, I mean, there are writers who've described Israel as a military or an army with a country attached to it. So, which is a bit, tough, but the Israeli Defense Forces absolutely is a very important institution. But there is a political, I mean, Israel is a democracy, and there's a political process. And it's not that the military is in the back room, dark smoke filled rooms determining what the policy is, like they do with Egypt and Algeria, for example. But absolutely, the IDF is also another very important one, and actually Turkey. So thank you. You've got me to now talk about sort of the Israel, Turkey, and Iran. Turkey, the military also. Actually, after Ataturk, Kemalism, which is what the sort of his principles are referred to, they are the military is sort of supposed to be the guardian, if you will, of the democratic system. And so Turkey's actually had 4 coups a coup d'etat, which means the military takes over, but they take over for a short period of time and then basically say, okay, now it's, all, sort of stability has returned. Now it's time for you to hold, civilian elections and for the civilian government to return. But the 1980 particularly coup in Turkey was particularly difficult and very hard on civil society. Absolutely. And then Iran has, of course, been using its military, the Revolutionary Guards and other, the Basij and other units within their military, they've been using and playing an important role. But Iran, we have to kind of separate them a little bit because they have this system called Vilayat al-Faqih, which is the rule of the supreme guardian, which is the rule of the clerics. So the clerics are way up and they control the military. Okay. Where in Egypt, it's the military that pretty much, runs the show. And so does Algeria. But still, here we are. We mentioned what, 5, 6 countries where the military has a role. It just differs from country to country, and also because of the nature of the government as well. So Ariel, thank you very much. Great comment there.
And we're going to go back to Miriam if it's all right. She's got.
Oh, sure. Come on, Miriam.
Go ahead, Miriam.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
So what do you think of, like, for example, as a comparison of like a country like Tunisia that's got a fairly small and weak army, but it's fairly successful as a democracy. Yeah. So is there a correlation there?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would like to point out Tunisia has a strong middle class. Middle class is incredibly important. It is the backbone, it is the spine of a democratic society. It also has a pretty decently educated middle class, again, but educated population. Also has a healthy population. And you're probably wondering, well, that's weird. Why is that important for political science? Well, of course it's important. In the sense that the governments in the past, starting with Bourguiba was the first president after Tunisia became independent from France. They invested quite a bit in their health and education infrastructure in terms of schools and hospitals and clinics and doctors and medical schools and all of that. And also in terms of building a professional middle class. And look around, any democratic society, a middle class is incredibly important. And that's something that, we pay attention to, even here in the United States. And we worry when the middle class is struggling. Because is that a bellwether for the struggle of a democratic system? So, Tunisia, yes, it's always had a very small military. Its leaders, Ben Ali, the one who came after Bourguiba, came out of the military, but it just never really played that role in its politics, interestingly enough. It's a population of 10, 11 million people. And it always had sort of a strong civil society presence, even though it was quite oppressed. And it has movements in terms of Ennahda, which is the Islamist movement, and the secular movement, which is the non-religious, and trade unions who are independent and secular, okay, as well as the Lawyers Association, the Chamber of Commerce, the human rights organizations. So they all played a role, and the military did not, because it just was not big, well-equipped, well-funded, and it just didn't, it didn't factor in. And as I mentioned, these other factors like a middle class and education and healthcare and so forth that really support a democratic society. Mariam, does that help?
It's okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Please. Now we have 5 minutes, and I really did want to go into the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we sort of are doing it in an unorthodox manner. All right, Brittany, please.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry. I know we only have a few minutes left.
No.
I just kind of have a question about how the political map is drawn for the Middle East. Like we keep referring to of like, okay, here are the Gulf countries, but then you also have Turkey, you know, over there. I know when discussing the Middle East, a lot of people include Afghanistan, they include Pakistan, but they're not part of the geographic Middle East. So I've always just been curious of how they all just kind of get lumped together, even though they're not really part of the map. So to
Great
speak.
question, Brittany. And if you were in my class, we actually spent our second class just on that question. I know it's shocking. You know, we spent an hour, 15 minutes talking about, first of all, what is the Middle East? Where did it come from? Where did the term come from? Because by the way, it was imported. It came from somebody on high in Britain somewhere, looking down and saying, oh, yep, this is the middle and it's east. Like, really? Middle of what?
Yeah.
So, and then you add North Africa to it. So look, that is something that is part of the difficulty with the region, frankly, is that we can't even decide on which countries to include and which not to.
Right.
It's still a debate until today. So we talk about that. And we can work with it. And in my class, we basically stop at Iran and stop at Turkey. So we don't go beyond, because really when you talk about Afghanistan, Pakistan, and all the sort of other stans, you're really going into a different world in terms of language and history and culture and so forth, okay? So when we keep it with Turkey, Iran, Israel, and then the Arab countries, that kind of brings it close, because Turkey has a lot of influence and role in the region, particularly these days, okay, but they speak Turkish. Iran has a lot of influence and role in the region and attempting to grow, but they speak Farsi, okay?
Right.
In their histories over there, remember, the Turks, the Ottomans went back to the 1500s, and there's some fabulous Netflix documentaries, by the way, about the Ottomans. But they ruled over that patch of land, okay, for hundreds of years. So you got to include Turkey. And then, of course, Israel is right smack in the middle, with Palestine. And you have to talk about that situation, absolutely. And I teach a class just on those two societies and two issues, Israel and Palestine, okay? And then you have the Arabic speaking countries. What I do is I do North Africa, which is Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, that's North Africa, with Mauritania as well, okay? Then you have Egypt, and then go east up all the way to Turkey. That would be the Mashriq, we call that in Egypt, in Arabic, which means the east, Al-Mashriq, versus Al-Maghrib, which means the west. And that would be those countries in North Africa. So you have Egypt with, the Palestinians, the Israelis, the Jordanians, the Lebanese and the Syrians, and then up to Turkey. So that's kind of one chunk. Then you come down then to the third section, which I call the Gulf, Al-Khalij in Arabic, which is Saudi Arabia. Iraq actually would be considered kind of part, but Iraq has a different particulars than the Gulf countries, meaning, so you have Iraq, Saudi Arabia, you go all the way down to Yemen, Oman, and then you have all the small countries that are along the Gulf. That's where we have the Arabian Gulf or the Persian Gulf. And I always say, depends on which side you're standing on. If you're standing on the Kuwaiti side, then it's the Arabian Gulf. If you are standing in Iran, on the Iranian side, then it's the Persian Gulf. So anyway, and then you would include sort of Iran in that kind of sub-region, if you will, because there are threads between them. Does that help?
Yes.
In terms of how kind of the region, and they're all connected, absolutely. So that's why now I do spend a little bit of time on Afghanistan, just because the invasion by the Soviets in 1979, yes, Afghanistan had definitely an impact on the Middle East. Okay. Yes. So, but we mention it particularly when we talk about political Islam.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right.
Do you want,
Paul tells me we have a few more.
Yeah, a few more. Okay. Yamilet, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but go ahead. I'm going to unmute you.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I have a question about Israel and Palestine, and especially now with the United States facilitated kind of like a peace agreement with Israel and the Gulf, some of the Gulf countries like the United Arab Emirates. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and if that's like the next step of like actual peace with Israel and Palestine, or if not, then what would be another path for that peace between those two countries?
Wow. Well, I don't know. I think you've heard me talk about this before just a little bit, but thank you for the question. It's an important one. Look, the stakeholders involved in this, they're the ones that are going to resolve it. Okay. And the stakeholders are the Palestinians and the Israelis. So, you know, it's they're the two chefs who need to make a good and decent and tasty stew. And if you have more fingers involved in that making of the stew, I'm sorry, I'm using a an image there, then I must say you end up with some troubles. But let me go back to what we were referring to is they're called the Abraham Accords, and that's between the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and they were top down in the sense they were government to government. So we'll be seeing a cold peace in the sense that, and not that the Emirates and Bahrain were frankly a threat to Israel. Okay. Israel has already made peace with Egypt, which was the first and number one threat because of its military. And they had already fought a couple of wars. So they've already ticked that box. They have peace with Jordan because that's right across the street there and in their neighborhood. So tick that box. And so everything else is, they were really hoping, this is way back, they were hoping that they could get Syria because that would be, you know, in the neighborhood, and then Lebanon. That was Ishaq Rabin, the former prime minister who sadly was assassinated of Israel. That was his hope, is to pick them off one after another. For the Emirates and Bahrain, they're not really a threat, but they're they're a gold mine when it comes to trade. When it comes to trade, when it comes to investment, when it comes to exchange in terms of technology and so on. So we'll see a lot of cooperation in that manner. How that will impact the Palestinians? Will it help the Palestinians? Sorry, as I get older, I'm getting more and more cynical. I'd love to see if the Emirates and Bahrain will invest in the West Bank, invest in terms of creating jobs and job opportunities. Will the Israelis allow them to do so? That would be nice. But nice isn't always political and isn't always helpful from their perspective, the Israeli perspective. But frankly, I mean, you know, creating jobs and working with Palestinians and developing and growing an economy would definitely be a step in the right direction. So, so we'll see. We'll see. It will benefit the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, government. Remember, government is very important there. We're not talking about, you know, civil liberties and freedom of speech in those two countries. So the citizens themselves, they're not, you know, unless they own a business. And they're interested in, you know, making a deal with, I know, for example, the Israelis make pipes. Well, pipes come in very handy when you're dealing with water, when you're dealing with oil, when you're dealing with a lot of things. So, and getting them from Israel will only take you a day, for example. So, you know, that type of, it's this level. It will, I doubt seriously that it will be a people to people and that there'll be, you know, sort of open tourism and, you know, cultural. They might try to do some cultural events where they'll have a, you know, film festival or arts exhibit or that kind of thing that they can try. We'll see. The third country that is supposed to be coming up is Sudan. Now, Sudan, I'm very sorry, I'll be blunt, but the United States is basically bribing Sudan to make peace with Israel. Bribing by saying, we will remove you from the foreign terrorist list if you make peace with Israel. Okay.
Oh, wow.
I mean, is that sustainable? Probably not. It really should come, we use a wonderful word in Arabic called qana'a. Qana'a means from belief, that you actually believe in what you're doing. And if you're being kind of bribed or you know, kind of tit for tat, it might not be very sustainable. And Sudan, frankly, should have been removed from this list 2 years ago when they had their uprising and removed al-Bashir from office. So it's a real shame that that's what's ending up happening.
Yeah.
So, because for something to be sustainable, it really needs to be grassroots, bottom up, as well as up down, kind of both ways.
Mhm.
Does that help?
Yeah, it helps. So I have another follow-up question with that.
Sure.
So, do you think that the United States should continue to facilitate these peace talks or these accords before Israel and Palestine to find these conflicts? If you're saying that the only way for them to reconcile and to have a true resolution from the conflict is for Israel and Palestine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm getting more and more bullheaded about that, in the sense that the stakeholders, they know where the table is. I'm talking about the negotiation table.
Mhm.
They know where it is. They don't need anyone to tell them where that table is. They've been negotiating for 20, 30 years. And yes, I know there are those who believe the United States is integral, is very important in playing a role. I'm saying, hey, let's make a new mistake. Why not, the Palestinians and the Israelis? And this is very sad to even admit. Maybe things haven't gotten really, really bad, that they can just continue the same way that they're continuing. But do we have to wait until things get really, really bad to force people to come to the table? There's some brilliant minds on both sides, and those brilliant minds can sit and they can negotiate. Oslo is an interesting example, because you know what, the Oslo, there's actually a fabulous documentary, and I think we can find it now. It's available at our library. It's called the Oslo. I can send it. It's called the Oslo Accords. But it's literally about the process of negotiations. It was done in secret, and it was the Norwegians who sort of, mum is the word, the United States didn't even know about it, and actually kind of got mad because they were left out in the cold. And it shows you how these negotiators developed the skills, and also the relationships. So if anyone's interested in negotiations on conflict resolution, it's a fabulous thing to watch. And it just shows you the relationships between people who really, were started out as absolutely as enemies. And how they continued and developed, and even after the Oslo Accords have really fallen apart, that those relationships have still remained. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to think about, that the stakeholders themselves are the ones to come to the table, and everyone else sort of, watch from afar.
Yeah.
Whether it's Russia or the United States or even the Europeans, because ultimately they have to come to an agreement.
Mhm. Thank you.
Just a thought. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. I think do you have time for one more question?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
All right, Justin,
I'm not going anywhere. we don't, my husband and I are pretty, we have stuff delivered. We really don't, we go take walks in our neighborhood. That's about it.
Excellent. All right, Justin, you are live.
Hey, hi, Justin.
Hi, Professor. So with some of the recent news coming out of France, do you believe that Erdogan can coexist with NATO in the next few years?
Wow, that's a great question. Thank you, Justin. Well, I mean, we could spend hours just talking about Erdogan and how he changed the constitution to give himself a lot more power. So in 2017, he held a referendum, and he became much more powerful. And his political party, I think, has actually ultimately has suffered as a result. But anyway, but he's still very much in charge. Erdogan is going to have to be careful, because I think that he bought this missile weapon system from Russia, right? I'm sorry, I don't get into the technical military stuff, but anyway, he apparently has not used it yet, and that's in direct contradiction with what NATO subscribes to. So what was he thinking? And is he trying to play off Russia versus the United States and NATO, the Europeans, and he was in the middle of sort of negotiations with the Europeans about all the refugees. Because remember, the EU gives him money to keep the refugees in his country and stop them from dangerously crossing the Mediterranean. So, and then, of course, with France and Macron and what the difficulties they're having there with extremists using Islam. I mean, I hate to call them even Islamists in the sense that they don't. For those of you who speak Arabic, لا لهم صلة للدين, meaning they don't even have a connection with the faith, with the religion. They're using it, and so France, of course, has gone through a horrific last few years, and just with the last couple of weeks, couple of months. With the events that have happened there. So France has a lot of self-reflection and self-introspection that it has to discuss and talk about in terms of their treatment of those French citizens who are of, Arab, North African, Muslim descent. 50% or more of their prisons are made up of North African French. So the French government and its people really have to have a discussion and have to figure out this internal problem. But at the same time, they have their extreme right wing being Le Pen, Marine Le Pen. I don't know if you follow her, and
Yes, ma'am.
the National Front. I heard that they changed the name of the party. But anyway, those guys are getting a huge boost now because they're saying, see, they're out of control and we need to come in and we need to clean up and so on. But you're not going to throw out 10 to 15% of your own population who are French. They were born there. And France has to have sort of this meeting of the minds of their insistence on secular government, which in French they call laïcité. Well, okay, very important concept, but at the same time, how do you allow those of other faiths to be able to function and work with and respect the rules of separation of religion and state? So I would say, France, roll up your sleeves. You got a lot of work to do in terms of internally within the country, let alone you have Erdogan, across the seas in Turkey. So I don't know, Justin, if that somehow, hopefully that answered some of your thoughts.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Just a small second question.
Oh, sure.
Going back to the last question that was asked about Israel and then tying it in with Erdogan, do you think that Netanyahu and Erdogan behave a certain way because there are US nuclear weapons in their countries? And if you attack those countries, all hell is going to essentially come your way?
That place where stop, drop, and roll doesn't work. You can't use that H word. I think that definitely plays a role because the existence of nuclear weapons, of course, is a deterrence, absolutely, and both of them are very prone, Netanyahu and Erdogan, to a lot of big talk, and whether they actually carry out some of the threats or carry out some of those pronouncements, I would say, they have to sit and think. So very, very good comment on your part. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. So let's see, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if I may sum up, the good, there's a lot of good about the Middle East. All right, a tremendous amount of good, in the sense of its people, absolutely magnificent, who've definitely shown us a lot of courage, and shown us that they can take a chance. They can go out there against all odds and break down those barriers of fear or those walls of fear that have been built over the decades, over the centuries. It's very hard to overcome fear, ladies and gentlemen, very difficult. So great people who deserve the best, I must say. But okay, I'm a little bit biased. An amazing history, great monuments, meaning, historical artifacts, places that you can go see, testament to their history. Art, culture, cuisine, can't forget the cuisine, absolutely delicious. Music, geography, they've got a little bit of everything in terms of deserts and forests and, believe it or not, even mountains with snow. You can go skiing in the Middle East. Yours truly, I went skiing for the first time in my life. Any guesses where I went skiing? There are probably 2 places in the region. You can do it in the chat box. Yes, Ariel, Iran is one, but that's not where I went skiing. Well, there's one more. Lebanon, bravo, thank you. Yamilet, you did it. Yes, Dubai. Sorry, so 3 places. I forgot all about Dubai. Oh my gosh, yes, you can go skiing in a shopping mall in Dubai. It's an indoor ski slope. It's massive. It's the size of 20 American football fields. It's wild. Anyway, so yes, you can go skiing when it's, 100 degrees outside, just in the United Arab Emirates. So you have this incredible geography, from beaches to mountains to deserts to forests, and marshes. The marshes in Iraq are an incredibly important ecological piece of land, and very important. And then you also have the Tunisia, the good, in the sense that it has persevered and has continued through a lot of difficulties, and it's a role model. And let's hope. I always say a little prayer for Tunisia. The bad being mixing up between religion and politics can be a very slippery slope. The natural resource that they have, it's a double-edged sword. It can be bad, but it can also bring good, in the sense of using those funds to help the country progress and develop and build infrastructure and so forth. So it's kind of a mixed bag. The politics, bad, in the sense that we don't have clear, open, transparent types of government. Very sadly, we have a lot of corruption, lack of opportunity for young people, for women have difficulties. And it's not the religion, it's the traditions, it's the culture. I mean, my goodness, you have Muslim majority countries that have had prime ministers who are women. So we can put that argument aside. But yes, there's a lot of politics that need reform, and the people's voice needs to be heard. You also have a situation when it comes to water, and if we were in class, we would have spent time talking about water and the increase of aridity being the lack of water. And today there's a big fight going on between actually Egypt and Ethiopia with the building of a dam. Ethiopia built the Renaissance Dam, and it is at the beginning of the Nile River. And the Nile Basin countries are going to be affected by them holding off the water from going all the way up, all the way to its final destination, the Mediterranean. But Ethiopia has its hands full right now with a very big problem with a province in the north called Tigray. And so I think at this point, the dam is going to sit aside for a moment. But remember, water is something that a human being cannot live without. And it is a very important and integral part of talking about the politics and in the Middle East and North Africa. In terms of the ugly, I think you know what I'm going to talk about. It's war, more war, and generations that have grown up in times of war and conflict, and it's exhausting. And I'm being, my goodness, people die, and hundreds and thousands. And this has been something. This is no way to live. No one wants to live this way. And over decades, you have death of innocence, and it is definitely ugly. So That's my very quick, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I thank you very, very much for spending this hour. Oh my goodness, we nearly spent an hour and a half. I am so sorry, Paul and Rachel, excuse me. I apologize, but we were having a good conversation. So I hope you'll join us for your graduate studies. And there are many more like me. Or maybe that's going to make you run away. No, I'm just kidding. But really, really appreciate it. And you know where to find me. My information is all on the George Mason, website, in terms of my name and email and website, bio and all of that. And then I'm sure you guys can Google me as well. But anyway, lovely spending the evening with you, and you've all raised some excellent questions, and I look forward to having you in class, I hope. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, this is wonderful. Emna, thank you. These are all folks. See, I remember my students and my students' names. Yes, and I have hundreds and hundreds of students over the years. So yes, beware. I do remember you. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over now to Rachel and Paul, and I appreciate it very much.
Yes, everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you, Professor El-Shazli. This was wonderful. And I really hope everyone was able to kind of get a taste of what we discuss at the Schar School and how we discuss it. And we have wonderful professors, experts on these topics. So if you are interested in learning more about the Schar School or even applying, please do email us at schar@gmu.edu, and we'll be sure to answer your questions right away and connect you with any professors that you might be interested in talking with. So everyone have a great evening, and we'll chat soon.